long before empires crowned at their capital, long before the marble domes and golden mosaics. There was only a small town and a strait, a quiet place where the waters of the Bosphorus met the open sea of Marmara, where Europe touched Asia, and the breeze carried salt, birdsong, and possibility. They called it Byzantium. It began as a Greek colony, founded, according to legend, in the 7th century BCE by settlers from Megara, a city near Athens. They were guided, so the stories say, by a prophecy from the oracle of Delphi, who told their leader, Byzas, to find the land opposite the blind. And so he sailed past the Aegean, past Troy's shadow, until he reached a peninsula so perfect, it seemed the gods themselves had drawn it. On one side, the Golden Horn, a natural harbor. On the other, the deep Bosphorus Channel. And just beyond that, the wide mouth of the Black Sea. Byzas knew this was the place, and so the city was named in his honor, Byzantium. For centuries, it remained modest but strategic, a trading post, a harbor town, a prize for anyone who sought to control the sea routes between Asia and Europe. It passed through many hands: Persians, Spartans, Athenians, Macedonians, and then came Rome. In the centuries that followed, the Roman Republic transformed into an empire. It swallowed lands in all directions, north into Gaul, west into Britannia, south into Africa, and east toward the Anatolian plateau. Byzantium, now under Roman rule, quietly flourished. Its position made it too valuable to ignore, but too distant to dominate the empire's core. And then, in the 3rd century CE, something began to shift. The Roman Empire was splintering. Civil wars, plagues, invasions by Germanic tribes, economic collapse. The center, Rome itself, was no longer safe. A new capital was needed, a city that could command the crossroads of trade and war, a city that could look east and west at once. And in the year 324 CE, a man with vision arrived on its shores. His name was Constantine, a soldier, a politician, a survivor of civil war, and now, emperor of a fractured world. He saw in Byzantium what others had overlooked, not a harbor, but a destiny. He declared it would be the new Rome. Construction began immediately. Walls were expanded, forums built, palaces and cisterns carved into the earth. Temples were reshaped into churches, and atop the ruins of the old Greek city, a new imperial capital slowly rose. By 330 CE, the city was dedicated as Constantinople, the city of Constantine. Rome still stood, but its soul was already moving east. This new capital was unlike anything before it. A mirror of old Rome, yes, but Christian now, ordered, symbolic. A city of domes instead of pagan columns, of processions and holy relics, of golden mosaics and whispered prayers. And at its heart stood Constantine's vision, not just of empire, but of eternity. He died just 7 years after its dedication, but what he began would outlive him by 1,000 years. Constantinople was born from necessity, but built on something deeper. A belief that empires could be reborn, that time itself could be redirected, that the future could have a capital. And as the last embers of the Western Roman Empire began to flicker, Constantinople would shine brighter, a flame that refused to die. Its walls would rise higher, its treasures would multiply, and soon it would become the most magnificent city in the world. When the Western Roman Empire began to crumble, its eastern twin quietly stood tall, fortified by water, wealth, and will. Constantinople, no longer just a project of Constantine, was transforming into a city of power. It rose like a crown at the meeting point of worlds. Europe to the west, Asia to the east, with the Black Sea above and the Mediterranean below. It was more than a capital. It was a statement. The Eastern Roman Empire, later called Byzantium, took shape around this glittering jewel. a city made not for emperors alone, but for eternity. The harbor known as the Golden Horn shimmered with merchant ships. Silk from China, spices from India, grain from Egypt. Coins rang through the marketplaces, stamped with imperial symbols, a daily reminder that commerce was the empire's heartbeat. But Constantinople was more than trade. It was a fortress. The city's famed Theodosian walls, built in the 5th century, were a marvel of defense. Triple-layered stone walls, towers rising every few dozen meters, a moat that could flood at will. No city in the world had such defenses. For nearly 1,000 years, those walls would not be breached by force. Behind them, emperors reigned, not in the style of the fading West, but as divine rulers. Their power was absolute, their robes woven with gold thread, their court layered in protocol, procession, and awe. The language of the court shifted from Latin to Greek, but the dream remained Roman, not the Rome of gladiators and senators, but the Rome of God and empire, of order and salvation. This was the new center of Christianity. Churches blossomed across the city. Monks copied ancient texts by lamplight. Priests debated theology with fierce devotion. And when heresies threatened to divide belief, councils were summoned. Nicaea, Chalcedon, Constantinople itself, to shape doctrine that still echoes in modern churches today. The city was a melting pot. Greeks, Armenians, Syrians, Persians, Jews and Christians, merchants and mystics. They passed through gates bearing names like Chrysius and Golden Gate, bringing goods and ideas in equal measure. Art flourished, not the sculptures of naked gods, but mosaics of saints and emperors, set in glistening tiles, blues and golds, sparkling under candlelight in shadowed chapels. Education thrived. Philosophy, mathematics, law. The ancient knowledge of Athens and Alexandria was preserved, even as it vanished in the chaos of Western Europe. And yet, this rise was not without struggle. Earthquakes shook the city. Plague swept through. Emperors were overthrown, blinded, exiled, and still the city endured. When Rome finally fell in 476 CE, when barbarians crowned themselves kings across Italy, Gaul, and Spain, Constantinople did not blink. The emperor still ruled here. The laws still stood. The coins still bore Latin inscriptions, even as Greek prayers filled the air. It was a bridge between worlds, not just East and West, but past and future. And so, through the 5th and 6th centuries, Constantinople grew, not just in wealth, but in identity. It was no longer a shadow of Rome. It was something new, an empire that would not collapse under the weight of its grandeur, but shape itself around it. A city of survival, a city of faith, a city where emperors dreamed in marble and ruled in silence beneath painted ceilings, and the low chant of monks echoing through basilicas. And as night falls on the Bosphorus, and the lanterns flicker in the breeze, one truth begins to emerge. Constantinople was not just rising, it was preparing to shine. The city of Constantine had risen, but under Justinian I, it would ascend. He came to the throne in 527 CE, a man of humble origin, born to peasants, educated in the corridors of power, and crowned with a vision as vast as the empire's faded borders. Justinian did not dream small. To him, Constantinople was not just a capital. It was the heart of a sacred mission, to reclaim Rome's glory, to restore unity to the Christian world, and to build a legacy that would outlive marble, manuscript, and map. The Eastern Roman Empire was already strong, but under Justinian, it became monumental. He began with law. Roman law had grown tangled over centuries, conflicting edicts, forgotten clauses. Justinian commissioned a team of scholars to gather, revise, and clarify it all. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law, a legal masterpiece that would echo across Europe for centuries, inspiring the systems of France, Germany, and beyond. But Justinian's vision was not confined to parchment. He turned to stone, to light, to the very bones of the city. In 532 CE, Constantinople trembled. The Nika riots exploded into violence. What began as chariot-racing faction disputes spiraled into 6 days of chaos. Palaces burned. Churches crumbled. Over 30,000 people died in the Hippodrome. Some urged Justinian to flee. He stayed, and when the smoke cleared, he built anew. At the city's heart, on the ruins of the old basilica, he raised a monument so vast, so otherworldly, that it would dazzle the world for 1,000 years. Hagia Sophia, its name means holy wisdom, and its dome, soaring, gold-hued, weightless in appearance, was unlike anything the world had seen. When Justinian walked into it for the first time, he is said to have whispered, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." The Golden Age was not just about glory, but reclamation. Justinian sent his general, Belisarius, westward. They conquered North Africa from the Vandals, Italy from the Ostrogoths, and parts of Spain from the Visigoths. For a brief, shining moment, Rome's lost provinces were Rome's once more. But all glory comes at cost. Wars drained the treasury. Plagues emptied the streets. In 541 CE, the plague of Justinian arrived. It spread like a whisper, a merchant's breath, a rat's bite. Soon, thousands died daily. The city quieted. The fountains slowed. Even Justinian himself fell ill, but survived. And yet, the empire pressed on. Justinian restructured the bureaucracy. He funded massive public works, roads, bridges, aqueducts. He strengthened the city's defenses, ensuring its walls would hold against time. His wife, Theodora, was no less legendary. Born an actress, a low station in Byzantine society, she rose to become empress, advisor, and equal. It was she who calmed the palace during the Nika riots. She who championed women's rights and religious tolerance. Together, they were a pair carved in paradox. A peasant emperor and a courtesan empress, ruling the mightiest city in the world. By the time Justinian died in 565 CE, Constantinople was not just secure. It was supreme, a city of laws and lanterns, of saints and senators, of towers that kissed the clouds, and scriptures that shaped civilization. But every golden age carries within it the weight of its own brilliance. The empire had stretched thin. The conquests would not hold. The debts would deepen, and new powers, Slavs, Arabs, even former allies, would test the empire's borders. Yet for now, in the candlelit chapels, beneath the dome of Hagia Sophia, amid the incense and whispers of monks, Constantinople gleamed, a flame against the darkening skies of history. And as the stars gathered above the Bosphorus once more, there was no doubt. The dream of Constantine had not only survived, it had thrived. As the centuries turned, Constantinople remained, gleaming behind her stone walls. A city wrapped in gold and guarded by the sea. But not all threats come with banners and siege towers. Some come quietly, whispering promises, offering help, and asking for entry. After the age of Justinian, the empire endured blow after blow. The plague returned in waves. Enemies gathered at the borders, Slavs, Avars, and Arabs pushing in, each testing the might of Constantinople's defenses. The city held. Its walls were unmatched, its location unbreakable. Even as the empire lost lands in the east and west, Constantinople remained a citadel of civilization, preserving art, faith, and learning while Europe plunged into chaos. And yet, something had changed. The city grew insular. Power turned inward. Palace intrigue bloomed like ivy through marble halls. Generals conspired. Courtiers schemed. Emperors were blinded, poisoned, exiled by their own guards. The empire's heart still beat, but now it beat behind closed doors. Then came the Crusades, summoned by the Pope in 1095. Tens of thousands of European knights, nobles, and peasants took up arms to retake the Holy Land from Muslim rule. They marched east, through Italy, across the Balkans, and arrived at Constantinople's gates. To them, this city was a marvel. Rich, ancient, strange, Greek-speaking, lavish, mistrustful. To the Byzantines, the Crusaders were a threat in shining armor. Still, the emperor, Alexios I, made a pact. He ferried them across the Bosphorus, promised them supplies. In return, they swore loyalty. And so the First Crusade marched on, reclaiming Jerusalem, spilling blood in the name of faith. But the uneasy alliance would not last. By the time of the Fourth Crusade, something had curdled. In 1204, after years of manipulation, politics, and broken promises, the unthinkable happened. The Christian Crusaders turned their swords not on Muslims, but on Constantinople itself, the city of Christendom, the Second Rome, a sanctuary of saints and relics. Sacked. For 3 days, chaos ruled. Churches looted, icons shattered, monasteries burned. Even Hagia Sophia, that sacred jewel, was defiled, its golden altar stripped, its marble floors soaked not with incense, but blood. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a betrayal. The Latin Empire was declared atop the ruins, a patchwork regime that ruled from the throne of the East. But it never fit. For nearly 60 years, the Byzantines were exiles in their own land, until in 1261, they returned, regained their city, and restored the Byzantine Empire. But the damage was done. The treasure was gone. The trust was broken. The empire had shrunk. And Constantinople, though still beautiful, was weary. Trade shifted to rising Italian powers like Venice and Genoa. Wealth that once flowed through the Golden Horn now passed them by. New enemies rose: Serbs, Bulgars, and most ominously, the Ottoman Turks. They moved across Anatolia like a slow tide, one town at a time, one fortress, one plain, until Constantinople stood like an island, surrounded by land it no longer controlled. Inside the walls, the emperors ruled, but only barely. Their palaces were cold, their troops few. The mosaics still glittered, but beneath the surface, cracks had formed. The city survived, on diplomacy, on memory, on the strength of its name. But history does not wait forever, and the final storm was gathering on the horizon. The sun rose over Constantinople, as it always had, casting soft gold over domes and towers, glimmering on the surface of the Bosphorus. But by the spring of 1453, those sunrises were numbered. The Byzantine Empire had become a shadow of its former self, a handful of territories, a weary capital, and a proud name stretched thin by time. Inside the city, they still lit candles before ancient icons, still walked beneath the dome of Hagia Sophia, still read scripture and studied philosophy. But the world beyond had changed. The Ottoman Empire, young but vast, had risen across Anatolia, replacing older Muslim dynasties and absorbing lands, once ruled by Rome and Byzantium. And at its head stood Mehmed II, just 21 years old, but already known as the Conqueror. He was brilliant, patient, and he had a vision, not just of victory, but of legacy. Mehmed saw Constantinople as more than a city. He saw it as destiny. The city of Constantine would become the city of Islam, the heart of a new empire stretching across continents. And so, in April of 1453, he came with an army, perhaps 80,000 strong. They brought cannons, not small siege weapons, but monstrous new machines, including one so large it took 60 oxen to move. The people of Constantinople watched from their walls. Inside, they numbered fewer than 8,000 defenders. Their emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, refused to flee. He knew this was the end. The siege began with thunder. Cannons roared against the walls, day after day, shaking stones laid 1,000 years before. But still, the Theodosian walls held. Ships approached from the sea, but a great iron chain blocked the Golden Horn. Mehmed had it dragged over land on greased logs, a breathtaking feat of engineering. And so the siege closed in from all sides. For 53 days, the city endured. Greek and Latin Christians stood together on the walls. Priests held mass beneath shattered windows. Mothers whispered prayers to sleeping children as tremors shook the ground beneath them. Then, on the night of May 28th, a final service was held in Hagia Sophia. Candles glowed on every ledge. Old men wept in silence. Enemies embraced. Some said angels were heard singing from the dome. And at dawn, it came, the final assault. Ottoman troops surged through the breaches. Fighting raged in the narrow streets. Church bells rang out, then fell silent. The emperor vanished, said to have fought to the last in plain armor, unrecognized among the dead. By midday it was over. After over 1,100 years, Constantinople had fallen, but it was not destroyed. Mehmed entered the city not as a savage conqueror, but as a ruler who respected its power. He spared Hagia Sophia, converting it into a mosque. He allowed Christians to live and worship. He repopulated the city with Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike. He named it Istanbul, a name drawn from the Greek phrase to the city, because even in conquest, Constantinople was still the city, not merely a place on a map, but a symbol, a crossroads, a memory made of marble, prayer, and fire. And as night fell over the city's now quiet skyline, the old and the new met in solemn silence. The Roman Empire, born in the Republic, crowned by Caesar, divided, transformed, and reimagined by the East, was no more. But its story, its wisdom, its beauty would echo. The walls have fallen, the banners have changed, and the chants inside Hagia Sophia now rise in a different tongue. But legacies do not crumble with stone. They echo, quietly, across centuries, across continents, in ways both seen and unseen. Constantinople was more than a city. It was a bridge between the ancient and the medieval, between East and West, between empires long buried and futures still unfolding. Its legacy begins with what it preserved. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, Constantinople became the guardian of classical thought. Its scribes copied ancient Greek and Roman texts, philosophy, science, medicine, and mathematics. When Europe lay in the shadows of the early Middle Ages, Byzantine scholars kept the lamps lit. Later, those very texts would pass into Islamic libraries, and then return to Renaissance Europe. The rebirth of reason, carried on parchment that once rested in Constantinople. Its law, too, endured. Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis became the foundation of civil law. In much of Europe, France, Italy, Germany, even today, echoes of Byzantine legislation shape modern justice. Its faith left an equally powerful imprint. Constantinople was the beating heart of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Here, theology was debated in candle halls. Here, the divine liturgy unfolded in golden domes, with hymns that seemed to rise all the way to heaven. Even after the Great Schism split East and West, the Orthodox Church carried on. In Greece, in Russia, in the Balkans, the cross carved into Constantinople's stones still stands in hearts. Its architecture, perhaps, is the most visible legacy of all. Hagia Sophia, that shimmering crown, became the blueprint for Ottoman mosques. Its domes inspired the Suleimani, the Blue Mosque, and countless others. And even as it changed from church to mosque, to museum, and back again, its shape reminds the world of a city that once dreamed in marble and light. And then, there's Istanbul. The name changed. The skyline shifted, but the soul remains. The streets still wind beneath Roman aqueducts. The old hippodrome still lingers near the heart of the city. Markets hum with life, as they did 1,000 years ago. In Istanbul's rhythm, one can still hear Constantinople's song, layered and complex, Ottoman and Byzantine, Christian and Muslim, ancient and eternal. Even in the West, the memory remains. Writers, painters, and travelers spoke of Constantinople with awe and melancholy. It became a symbol of lost grandeur, of what once was, and perhaps of what might still be. Because legacy is not about what survives in stone, but in meaning, in the way a name carries weight, in the way an idea lives on, even when its empire does not. Constantinople showed the world that cities could be more than places. They could be visions, dreams cast in limestone and gold, places where civilizations met not to erase each other, but to weave something new. And now, as you drift deeper in a rest, imagine those domes again, glowing in candlelight, the sea shimmering beneath the moon, the soft call to prayer, the quiet rustle of an ancient manuscript. Constantinople may have fallen, but it was never forgotten. It lives in Istanbul, in the books you read, in the laws you follow, in the stories that still unfold where continents meet, and perhaps in your dreams tonight.